Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to the channel. It's called Fantastic Fantasy, where I discuss, in my humble opinion, the most pivotal comic book events that happened in my life as a comic book reader. I became a grounded comic book reader in the early 1980s, so I do have a long tradition of reading comic books. I primarily read DC and Marvel comics. Because back then in the 1980s, those were the primary major two comic distributors. I don't know if there was anything else in the early 80s. So the topic for today is one of the most pivotal events that happened in comic book history that changed comic books forever. Drum roll, please. That moment was when Tony Anthony Stark abandoned his role as the invincible, the incredible, the spectacular Iron Man and handed over to his best friend, who was an established pilot and military man, James Rudy Rhodes. Yes, that's it. One of the greatest underappreciated events that took place in comic book history was when Tony Stark handed over the mantle of Iron Man to his best friend. Now, the reason that it happened, and this is another pivotal moment in comic book history. We all know that Tony Stark suffered from alcoholism. You know that to this present day. But in 1980, specifically in 1983, it showed Tony hit rock bottom. He basically lost everything. He lost his company. He lost his wealth. He lost many of his friends. He lost everything. He basically fell to the role of being a vagrant, a person who lived on the streets. Now, I don't read Iron Man as much as I used to as when I was a child, so I don't know if he ever had a severe relapse into that role where all his wealth was gone. Stan Obadiah Smith, I believe his name was, who was Stark Industries' major competitor, took over the Stark Industry Company. All of that happened because Tony Stark fell into severe alcoholism, where many panels show him with the alcohol bottle in his hand. I don't think that they did was show something like that. That was back in 1980, because today they want to show politically correct scenes and more inspiring scenes for youngsters, especially since Iron Man is one of MCU's leading flagship characters. I don't think he will ever relapse into that again. But like I said, the topic of this episode is when Tony Stark handed over his role to James Rhodes. We never saw anything like that before. Up until 1983, as far as I know, no hero ever relinquished his role and handed it over to anyone else. Since Spider-Man was created in 1960 up until 1983, he always was Spider-Man. Batman, I believe he was made in the 1940s up until 1983. He was always Batman. No one took on that mantle. No one took on that role. When Superman was created in the early 1930s or 40s, he was always Superman. No one took his role. The same applies for Wonder Woman. When she was created, 1940, 50, whatever, up until 1983, she was always Wonder Woman. But in that pivotal moment, when Tony Stark handed that role over to his best friend, his best buddy, James Rudy Rhodes, that changed comic book history forever. And I'm going to tell you how. After that event, when we had that new Iron Man, years later, other characters began doing that. Captain America handed over his role of Captain America several times to the guy who played Sam Wilson, among other characters. In the death of the Superman arc, when Superman died, many other characters took on the mantle and name of Superman. Wonder Woman, I believe in the late 1990s, 1980s, she abandoned her role, and another person from Paradise Island became the new Wonder Woman. Spider-Man, recently in like 2010, 2011, Peter Parker was taken over by Dr. Octavia Octopus. So a new person became the Amazing Spider-Man in spirituality, because I know when Doc Ock took over Spider-Man, he inhabited Peter Parker's body. So in a way, Peter Parker was still Spider-Man, but the mental part of it was Parker was gone, and Octavia, this octopus, was the dominant figure in his mind. But the major point is, when Tony Stark relinquished that role to his best friend, it never occurred up until that 1983 moment. After he relinquished the roles, other heroes, and maybe even villains, began to relinquish their role. Because yes, I know even the Hobgoblin, his role was taken over by other people. But he didn't, like, I know the Hobgoblin, he became the new Green Goblin, but he never took on the actual mantle of Green Goblin. He never wore no green costume on. He wore that, what is it called? That orange costume. So he was a distinguishing figure for the Hobgoblin. He just based his powers on his predecessor, who was the Green Goblin. But as was stated, after 1983, many superheroes would retire, get sick, became missing, and they would relinquish their role to someone else. And here's a pivotal moment, or a pivotal example that happened recently. The mighty Thor. He became unworthy of wielding his hammer, Mjolnir, or Mjolnir, whatever you want to call it. I get that name mixed up all the time. But he could not wield that enchanted hammer. So Jane Foster, she became the individual who was worthy to wield the hammer. She became the mighty Thor. Like James Rudy Rhodes, who was an African American back then, and that was even more pivotal for Iron Man. Not only did Stark hand his role over to another person, he handed it to another person of another ethnicity, an African American. Jumping to the future, the current age of comic books, Jane Foster, her role, because like Thor, Thor, there were many other people who became Thor, like Eric Masterson, or whatever his name is. He became Thor, but I think Thor still was dead mentally. He just took on the role of Donald Blake, and that was another change. See, that Tony Stark Iron Man conversion even took place on Thor, when Donald Blake, who was the original human, who was Thor when Thor wasn't in his godly form, it switched over to Eric Masterson. He became the new human template for Thor. So like I said, that was a pivotal moment in comic book history that's underplayed, downplayed, overlooked to this very day. If Stark never made that switch, our heroes would be the same heroes from 1940, 1950, 1960, whatever. That was one of the changing moments in comic book history. So thank you all for taking a few moments to come by to visit this humble channel. Give me your opinion on what you think. If you have a comic book history that goes way back to the 1980s, when I start profusely collecting comic books, do you think that was a game changer in many comic books, when Stark relinquished his superhero role to another? Oh, and before I go, one thing I do like about that too, because when Stark took over the Iron Man armor, it's like it was easy to weld that armor. It's like he was already a master. It never showed us undergoing that training of how to be Iron Man. He just presto was Iron Man and knew how to weld all the technology. He didn't have to go through any training. But when his friend Rudy took over that armor, he had to undergo training. He was untested. He had to familiarize himself with the armor. Now, even though Stark made the armor, yes, he made all the weapons, all the technology in there, but he still needed to have training on how to use it, and we never saw him doing that. I don't think we ever saw him doing any training sessions. But with Rudy, he had to learn the ins and outs of the armor. He had to learn how to, he had to learn how to adjust his strength level. He had to get adjusted to the, I don't think back in the 80s, I don't think they had onboard AI on there. Iron Man was just a naked suit, and he had to figure out everything on himself. He didn't have no artificial intelligence back in 1983 explaining to him how to use certain systems. He had to figure everything out on his own. Now Stark did have that advantage. He knew, since he was the designer of the armor, he knew every weapon system. He knew every piece of technology in that armor. So it was no hassle for Stark to bring up the repulsor rays or activate his suit to a certain strength level. He didn't have no trouble activating his Quinjets, which was in his boots at that time. But Rudy, he had to learn how to do all of that. He had to learn how to handle his strength levels. He had to learn how to activate the Quinjet propulsion units. He had to learn how to use the propulsor rays adequately, adjust their strength level. He had to learn how to use that unibeam and some of the onboard tech that was inside the armor. So for him, the writers of Marvel Comics gave him a little sidekick. He had a sidekick from Stark Industries to help him learn how to weld the armor properly. And that was a good thing right there too. So with the Iron Man armor, with Rhodes, he didn't just jump in and become Iron Man. He had to go through a period of trials and testing and how to weld that armor. So, once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you found this channel, if you found this episode entertaining, leave a like, a thumbs up. If you would like to subscribe to hear future content about my favorite comic book events, not the world's, my favorite comic book events, because I do have a long established history of comic books. I have a lot of them. Please hit the likes button, and please subscribe, and please leave a comment on what you think was a pivotal role in comic book history. Alright, thank you all. You have a wonderful day, and keep reading your comic books.